power, not the other power. Lazima tuwe na power. Yes. Tunataka power. Yes. Stima. Okay. Engineer Dr. Joseph Siror is the MD and CEO at Kenya Power. He's our guest. Good morning, Engineer.
Good morning.
Asante sana for joining us.
Asante.
We were saying earlier before you came here with Mariam, he's Engineer Dr. Siror, PhD in engineering, electrical engineering, having worked there for long. And then last year, towards the end of the year, we saw you being admitted to the bar as an advocate of the High Court. Ni nini bwana? Next, CPA?
Next, there are a number of things I'm lining up. I want to brush my Mandarin.
Okay. Mandarin.
I did my PhD in China. I understand about 20 to 30% of Mandarin.
Okay.
So in fact, I do go to a Mandarin church here in Nairobi. The intention is for me to perfect the Mandarin language. I'm also thinking of learning Hebrew. I've started learning some few Hebrew words. And after I'm done with that, I will look at the next frontier. But I also did arbitration. I didn't quite qualify. I missed by a few marks to become a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators of the UK. But I'm a member, a chartered member of Institute of Arbitration UK.
Those who
just
know you
need to do fellowship, nimalize hiyo, and then I will look at the next thing.
Uongeze kwa portfolio.
Yes.
Those who know you also to be a man of the word of God.
That's first and foremost.
Theological.
No, see, theology. In fact, at times, from where I sit, theology at times does more damage than good.
Allah.
Because it skews your thinking in a particular way. But the plain reading of the word is really very clear. And I'm one who loves studying the word and learning from what the word has to say. And preaching the same. I'm first and foremost a preacher. My official signature for over 20 years is Jesus Saves. That's
Jesus Saves.
That's how I sign in my workplace, and that's how I sign in the bank and wherever I am.
Well, asante sana. Before we get into the conversation, Mariam is going to give you the day's quote. Normally, it would be Janet Bogo who gives you the quote, but she's been away. So Mariam takes the mantle.
Today's quote is by Joel A. Barker. He is a futurist, often cited in African leadership and policy forums. He said very simply that without vision, action is merely a dream. Without vision, without action, vision without action is merely a dream. It's really that day. Yes. What does it speak to you? Do you agree, disagree?
I do agree, because if you are not going to implement, it's vision without action, which is a dream.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. You cannot have a vision for it to be ever realized. It must be followed by action.
True.
Otherwise, if you have a dream of, say, changing a situation or being the leading farmer, you cannot afford to sit down and think about that vision. You must step out of the door, look at what it requires for you to achieve what you have as your vision.
Very true.
Very well said. Very well said. You sit at the helm of a company that we interact with on a daily basis. As a power distribution company, Kenya Power, every month, every day, we are buying tokens. Every month, we are paying power bills. And the common conversation I'm sure you've had from the days you were working just as an engineer in power to now you're the boss of Kenya Power is about the cost of power, right? Our cost of power, is it likely to go down anytime soon? Let me just start from there. We are not going to ask whether it's high. It is. Is it likely to go down anytime soon?
The cost of power is a combination of several things. And one of the things that Kenya, which has been really pioneering in a number of areas, was to implement what is called cost-reflective tariff. Cost-reflective tariff is a tariff where you want to compensate for the entire ecosystem that is involved in that power being available and being distributed. That is to say, you look at the cost of generation. And in that cost of generation, there could be elements of capital costs. Indeed, there could be elements of prospecting for, say, for steam, for GDC. So if you look at them right now, what you pay in your tariff, 63 to 65% goes to generation. So for every 100 shillings you pay, 63% has gone to compensate for those who are generating. There is then the element of transmission. In the generation space, that is where you have KenGen, you have the independent power producers, you have GDC, who is involved in de-risking and looking for steam, which is then converted by the developers.
Right.
At the transmission space, we do have, of course, The leading is Ketraco, but we do have some transmission assets still which are domiciled within Kenya Power, where if you look at the lengths, Kenya Power owns about 3,700, while Ketraco could be almost possibly doing about 6,000. So the one rapidly expanding in the transmission space is Ketraco.
Sorry, hold on.
Yes.
You said Kenya Power and Ketraco split. Is that kilo?
They play within the transmission space.
Yes.
Within that transmission space,
yes.
Kenya Power owns and operates 3,700 kilometers of transmission lines.
Yeah, yeah.
Then Ketraco does possibly about 6,000.
Okay.
And they are the ones who are really rapidly expanding.
Okay.
If you look at what Kenya Power owns, they are mainly the very old lines and maybe minimal interventions just to address the customer requirements and customer pains.
Yeah.
Where possibly extending a small transmission line and doing a particular intervention would actually bring the greater relief. Okay. But for most of the massive infrastructure projects for transmission lines which are long, high voltages, that you will mainly find Ketraco doing it. And there's been a conversation within government for a PPP structure where the private sector can also come into play at the transmission space.
Yeah.
Then after you are done...
What percentage of our cost of power goes into paying for transmission?
I know what goes to Ketraco may be about 4%. Yeah, it may just be about 4%.
Okay.
But when you look really at the infrastructure, it's actually quite massive. To have a 6,000 kilometer transmission,
True.
It's actually quite massive.
True.
And then at the tail end now, you have, of course, the distribution and retail. Now, when you look at that cost structure, the current tariff that we have, maybe what I also needed to add is that there are some levies and taxes which are then loaded on top. That is the structure of the Kenyan tariff. Now, there are a number of interventions that can definitely be undertaken, and we are undertaking them, to see that reduction in cost. Some of the expensive IPPs came into the country at a time when we really needed them. So that at times when they are really vilified, I feel bad. Because really, the issue then was, do you want power, or do you... You know, at times people are willing to pay for expensive power than no power at all.
Yeah.
So Kenya was then staring at a situation where there was going to be massive load shedding, what the normal Kenyan would call it rationing. So the government then had to make a decision, and I don't fault them. I think that was the right decision then. Bring in fast generation, and the one that you can deploy very quickly are thermals, which again, if you look at their cost structure, you not only have to compensate for the operations costs, which are ordinarily high, but also the issue of the fuel that is used. So they came in at a time when we really needed them.
Right.
Those PPS, again, for them to recover their cost, needed long-term contracts because the costs were high. So they would enter into 20 years, 30 years, most of them are 20-year contracts.
Okay.
So at that time, they were very necessary, and some of them, their tenure has expired. And whenever those expensive thermals, their tenures expire, we never renew them. So they just go and they are falling off. Okay. But the new generation that is coming on board, and that's actually what I want the Kenyans to know, are always going to be cheaper. And maybe, again, talking about the cost of power, what really determines the cost, even if you are to go global, is the technology you are using to deploy.
Sorry, just before you go into the technology, I just really want to break it down with that 100 bob in my mind.
Yes.
So 63 to 65% goes to KenGen for the generation.
Not KenGen.
The
generation.
Generators.
Because
KenGen and IPPs
and
the Geothermal Development Corporation as well, right? Sawa. Then another 4% goes to transmission, so Ketraco.
Yes.
Is that part of it?
How much is Kenya Power getting in transmission?
In transmission.
In transmission, I may not have the figures offered, but those are figures I can get. Then the rest of about 29% is going into taxes, levies, distribution, and all that. I may not have the figures in terms of unpacking all of them.
Okay.
But the biggest component, and that's why I mentioned it, is actually it goes to generation. And I now wanted to speak to that part of generation. If you look at the cost of generation, the cheapest in the long run is hydro. So whenever you have massive hydro generation in a country, then you are staring at the possibility of having very cheap power. And indeed, if you look at the region, they are predominantly hydro. In Kenya, if you look at the biggest component, it's actually geothermal. Geothermal is excellent, but the cost is much higher than the cost of hydro.
Okay.
Then, so that in the Kenyan situation, we have about 940 megawatts, which is coming from geothermal. But we are currently increasing. There is another 35 by Ishan, which is just about to, it's already being tested, and it's going to add in 35 megawatts. And again, maybe while at that, if you again compare the old generation, which was mainly by KenGen and even some IPPs, vis-a-vis the most recent, the generation costs of that time were much higher than today. The cheapest generation right now from geothermal is from an IPP called Socian. The next one is Kaishan, which is going to be, that one is 6.9 cents. And if you under the breakdown, 4.9 US cents goes to the conversion, which is the Socian company, and 2 cents goes to GDC for the steam. If you now come to the ones that are coming on board, then the second and the third, it will be 5 cents conversion, 2 cents goes to GDC.
Compare that to thermal?
Compared to thermal, the most expensive thermal, for example, would be the Moroni GT, which goes for almost 70 shillings per unit.
70?
Almost 70 shillings, yes. If you add the taxes and all that, it's upwards of 65 shillings.
Wow.
So the whole issue really, there was this notion that KenGen is cheap and IPPs are expensive.
Yeah.
That is, it may be partly true, but grossly incorrect.
Partly grossly incorrect.
Grossly incorrect in this sense.
Muhoroni is 70 shillings.
Almost 70 shillings.
Okay.
Per kilowatt hour.
Okay. And Kaishan, we said 5, was it?
4.9 plus 4.9 plus 2 cents.
Plus
so it
two.
is 6.9 US cents. So if you want to know Kenyan multiply by around 1.3, that would give you around 8 shillings.
8 shillings.
So 8 shillings against almost 70 shillings. So it's really technology. And what does happen, Eric and Mariam, is that the initial days when you set up a plant, you recover your costs. And this recovery happens possibly over a 20-year period. So that is to say, any plant which has been in existence for over 20 years, the capital cost has been recovered. So once the capital cost has been recovered, the only cost then that you will be paying is operations and maintenance. Most of the hydro plants of KenGen are more than 20 years old. So most of the capital cost was recovered. So what we are only paying for is the operations and maintenance cost. And you'll find those hydros are quite cheap. But any plant, be it KenGen or IPP that is recent, the capital costs are still being recovered. And at the point of time when they will fully be recovered, then it's going to be cheaper. But where I wanted to come was that as the old thermal generations, which are quite expensive, upwards of 20 shillings, 30 shillings, and upwards, as they are coming to an end, what is coming to replace them as the cheaper ones? And that's why I was quick to tell you, there are these geothermal plants that are coming on board. One is going for 6.9 US cents. The next is 7 cents. The next one is 7 cents. And right now, as we talk, we are also engaging.
US cents, yes.
US cents, yes. Right now, as we are talking, we are engaging with developers in terms of entering into PPAs with them. And we are really negotiating tough to ensure that, yes, they get what is due to them, but they don't get those very onerous clauses, which Kenyans have always frowned, to say, how could you be this generous to some of these developers? And we really want to see that, yes, they win in the sense of being able to recover their costs and in deploying their plants, but anything that we consider onerous, we are also very quick to frown at it. And also, where we know the cost that they are presenting before us is much higher than you'd get out there, we are very keen to say, no, this is still too high. And the intention is to ensure that now going to the generation plants that are coming, going forward, are definitely going to be cheaper and cheaper. And another factor that really helps us in...
I want to ask, before you even continue, why are we costing in dollars?
The issue, if you look at the capital structure...
It means that we are contracting in dollars.
Yes. The capital structure for most of these plants, they get there is a percentage. Normally, they possibly inject about 25% equity, and 75% is usually financed or loan facilities. Most of these loans, by virtue of the massive investment that is required, are normally foreign. And to ensure that that foreign flows and it cushioning against the challenge of not getting those inflows, are then, or rather, the variation in terms of exchange rate, to caution against that. It can go either way. But most of these foreign financiers would not want to hear that you are signing a contract on Kenya shillings. So they insist on that dollar issue. But even as we engage the PPS, that's actually why I still want to come back to that. We normally tell them also, of these costs that you are still going to pay, there are those that you are going to be paying your employees, paying the taxes in Kenya. Why should we have 100% being in foreign currency?
Yeah.
You've told us it's 75%. Why don't we then agree that 20% or 30% is Kenya shilling, and then the one now that goes to, service the loans, you have in dollar terms. So those are some of the negotiating parameters that we are currently using. Insisting that where you can, let's get as much of Kenya shilling as possible. And indeed, I think one of the revolutionary things that the government is doing, and we are hoping it's going to be available to finance those areas, is the issue of, say, infrastructure, a bond, or coming up with this resourcing for funding of infrastructure. So that if Kenyan shillings are then used to finance these plans, then we can always insist on 100% Kenya shilling, because then the loans would actually be in Kenya shilling. So I think, Mariam and Eric, what I was coming towards that all the future generation, I was talking about the cost of power. So all the future generation which is going to come on board, we are here to ensure we get the best
it's going to be cheaper.
And the cheapest.
And then secondly,
my original question, as you answer all this, please remember, when are we going to get cheaper power?
Exactly.
My question is on the when.
And as he goes into that, there's a part of this breakdown. This is consumer perspective. So forgive us if we stay here a little bit. How much of it goes to taxes, levies, etc.? And what are there any variable costs within those levies and taxes?
There are some levies like REP levy, which goes to last mile programs. I think it could be set about 5 shillings or 5. They could be a 5% or 5 shillings.
Yes, for the rural electrification program.
Electrification. There are levies called by Warma. And I think this is another one which has an interesting dimension, because we believe that for the water that is, hydro generation does not use water. In fact, if anything, it actually dams them and assists in managing so that it doesn't cause destruction downstream. As it is today, like the cascade, the Seven Forks cascade right from Masinga, when that water is held, there is a levy that comes from Warma for the water that is dammed and the water that passes through the dam. And I think the funny thing at times is that the levy applies on the first cascade, that's at Masinga. When it goes to the next one, it's again levied. When it goes to and it's the same water. And at times we were feeling as energy sector, instead of being rewarded for holding back the water so that it doesn't cause damage,
we're being charged.
We are being charged. And then not once, but
7
for every
times.
It's not now. It doesn't reach 7 as it is right now. I think the dams are less. So for every cascade and every point it's held, there is a levy there.
All right. How many shillings is that?
Is it 2 pass? No, it's actually in cents, but I could. I may not have all the figures, but a few cents. But then, of course, there is also April levy. So there are a number of levies that come there. Before now, you levy the 16% VAT.
The bottom line is the 29% that's shared between distribution and levies and taxes. The bulk is going to the levies and taxes.
We could disaggregate it, but it's possible. Yes,
it's possible that the levies and taxes are taking more than.
But of course, also to run, if you look at the entire network again, we have a network of about 330,000 kilometers. About less than 10,000 is transmission. That is now the one that I mentioned to you. Around 3,700 Kenya Power
and 6,000.
So transmission is about 10,000. Then when you come to distribution, that is now Kenya Power. We have about 88,000 kilometers. And then now the low voltage is 230,000 kilometers. So if you look at the size of the network, the massive grid is actually in the hands of Kenya Power. And to manage all this requires massive investments in terms of maintenance. I think, in fact, before I came, someone was asking a question that, why is it that you are always calling for outages here and there? And it's because of the massiveness of that infrastructure. Where we are so determined to maintain that.
We want to take a break, engineer. Then we come back and we'll continue into that, onto this costing issue. And I still want to know when our power is going to get cheaper. 28 minutes after 8, we're having a conversation with engineer, doctor. Is it doctor, engineer? Which comes first?
Whichever, even preacher.
Engineer Dr. Wakili. Joseph Siror.
And Mubiri.
Joseph Siror. The MD and CEO of Kenya Power. We'll be back in a moment.
C2.
Several comments here, and we'll find a way to interrogate include some of these questions, so you don't have to answer them immediately. Eric Morioki is wondering, how does engineer know what everybody gets except the institution he heads? Because he's the one who's preparing the bills. He's the one receiving money. He's the one who's passing on the money, right? Charles Ndongo, on the onset of geothermal power production in Kenya, we were made to understand that it would be cheaper than hydro. Now, this turnaround, that it's more expensive, doesn't make sense to me. I thought geothermal generates more electricity, so though it's more expensive. So he's wondering, Allah, got to be able to keep out geothermal, it's going to be cheap. Now you're saying it's more expensive than hydro. Jose says specifically how many thermal generators are supplying, and when do we expect specifically the last contract of thermal generators to lapse of the current ones? What's the reason between the large cost disparity between Kenya and her neighbors? We pay approximately 34 shillings per unit in Kenya compared to Ethiopia, 0.77 shillings, Tanzania's 12 shillings. That's Bakari Sanya. Why did Kenya Power stop including taxes and levies in the token purchase message? And Jose is back saying, I believe the solution to high bills and poor customer service lies in liberalizing the power distribution market. Can Kenya Power survive a liberalized market with multiple power distributors? Isaac Dereva is asking, EPRA instructed Kenya Power to hand over the National Control Center to Ketraco for independence of power dispatch. We'll find ways of infusing this conversation.
Great.
As we get back into you explaining the journey towards cheaper power, and you're saying we are phasing out as the contracts for the IPP, the thermal IPPs are lapsing, we are bringing in cheaper power.
Exactly.
So we can even start with this one by Jose. When do we expect the last of the current thermal IPP contracts to lapse?
It may be, I may not be very accurate, but could be around 2034, 2035, thereabouts.
Okay. But a bulk of them?
No, in fact, some of them have been retiring. There's even one that retired last year. I think there's another one the year before. So as they come to an end, we don't renew their PPAs.
So as they retire, we basically tell them shut down your facility.
And recover. And at times recover everything.
You've made your money, close shop, go.
Everything, yes. And remove everything from site.
But
because
why?
a number of those places, environmental. You want it to be restored to the way it was before they entered.
All right. So the question again is, people are comparing our power plus the neighbor's power, and people feel that Kenya's power is more expensive than the neighbor's power. First of all, is that true? You said it will be largely true, but grossly inaccurate.
Yeah, the issue would be, if you look, I did mention that when you look at the tariff structure in Kenya, it's cost reflective.
Yeah.
So once it seeks to recover the cost from generation, transmission, all the way to distribution, and then you add the levies and taxes. If you look at our neighboring countries, I could pick Ethiopia. I think that would be a very good example. Right now, most of their generation plants were subsidized. That's actually the government shouldered all the costs of some of these infrastructure development. So that then what the customers or what the citizens are paying does not include any element of capital cost. And even that tariff in itself is not even cost reflective. After all that has been recovered.
Right.
We did have an engagement with Ethiopians last year, both EEP, and that is the one which is involved in transmission, and EEU, which is the utility, who actually supplies some of our border towns. But the cost that they supply at is not the one that is supplied, because they know the one inside their country is subsidized.
Yes.
So when they are selling to us, they don't sell to us subsidized rates.
Yeah.
That is to say, if they are really to go commercial, the prices then they would be selling is totally different.
Yeah.
And when you look at that, in fact, the conversation that we had from them at the time was that they are looking at being cost reflective in the next 5 years.
Right.
They know it will be too steep to its customers for them to use one jump from the subsidized tariff
to the
cost reflective. So they have given a transitional period of 5 years where they are going to move towards cost reflective tariff. And maybe just for information, Mariam and Eric, if you just had one bulb, say of 5 watts, and you turned it on for 4 hours in a day for 30 days, what kind of cost do you expect? Just off air, what kind of cost do you think is reasonable?
So 30 hours a month.
So
no, say 4 hours. You have one bulb, which nowadays 5 watts LED is bright enough. You turn it for 4 hours per night, and you use it for 30 days.
How much does that? I'd have to know.
No, I'm just saying, what would be a reasonable price?
If
If somebody was to ask you.
I don't know, 200.
Do you know our tariff is actually less than 100 bob? Because it's 12 shillings. I mean, if you look, before you load in the taxes and the others, it's 12 shillings.
You see, that's the thing.
And 70% of the Kenyans, by the way, are between 0 to 30 units. And 0 to 30 units is the cheapest, the lifeline.
Right.
That is where 70% of the Kenyans are. But the ones with more things, there's also
a
an
premium
aspect.
that comes with that. We'll talk about that. But unajua sasa shida ni inaweza kuwa 100, but then yes, you add on the taxes and the levies and all of that.
Utafika 150.
Utafika probably around 150. Many questions. As far as is there
I still want to go back.
Is there a case to
into
be
a
made?
when. You know,
I was about to say, is there a case to be made? Because you've said, you know what, Ethiopia, the government has been subsidizing the cost of power, the cost of the infrastructure. Fine. Now they're moving to something that's cost reflective.
Cost reflective, exactly.
Is there a case to be made for us also, having government absorb some of this to essentially spur the economy? Because the cost of power is a huge factor in the cost of doing business in Kenya. It's why essentially manufacturing and industry sometimes seem to struggle. So is there a case to be made, even if it's only for a period of time and then you phase it out, but to essentially have government absorb part of the cost of power?
I know, of course, globally speaking, a cost-reflective tariff is the way to go. But this is a conversation Kenyans can have. Legislators can wade into this area. But I think it really makes more sense for cost-reflectivity in the sense of it not requiring any subsidy. So that is to say, as it is today, the electricity sector is self-sustaining. It doesn't require any support in terms of injection to be able to function.
Okay.
But of course, if you are to look at the other infrastructure areas, like the roads and the likes, definitely you would need to inject some funds. And maybe really, from your perspective, if you look at the impact of doing a road to a place which is not rigged, the economic turnaround and the impact is going to be massive.
True.
And ultimately, it will lead to higher taxes, and that can be recovered in that manner. But the electricity sector is such that, yes, I think it's admittedly, it is known that the impact is even much more. But I think the current structure is that most of the costs are still plowed back, and we have to recover that. But it's a conversation Kenyans can have, but definitely from where we sit and within our pay grade, we can say that what we are doing where we are sitting is to ensure, first of all, that all the generation, we really negotiate and get the best pricing for the same.
Right.
And also, because one of the other aspects that can lead to higher costs also would be, there are still a number of places in Kenya, unfortunately, which are still off-grid.
Right.
Off-grid, these are mainly run by generators and diesels.
Yeah.
And I really apologize at times for the challenges we have had with some of these off-grid areas. I really apologize to those residents. Ultimately, when we expand the grid to those areas, then definitely even the cost is going to come down. Because if you look at the cost that we are incurring also because of fuel, fuel, first of all, within the grid and also for the off-grid, all those are high costs. And even the quality of services in those places, when there's a challenge in terms of getting the resourcing to be able to maintain them and ensure that we have newer generators and all that. Right. So if there is really a call at times, I would still say Ketraco really needs to be supported to expand the transmission links to most of the parts of the country.
Okay.
Because one of the things, Mariam, and I know at times when we went into this area, we look too technical, is that whenever you are moving power between places, the best way to move it is at the highest voltage possible.
Okay.
If you really want to reduce the losses. Maybe for a simple language, if you look at I don't want to sound technical, but medium voltages in Kenya start from 11,000 volts. It goes to 33 and then 66.
That's medium.
That is medium voltage.
Then transmission. Volts.
Yes. Then transmission starts with 132,000, 220,000, 400,000, and finally we have 500,000 from Ethiopia, or Ethiopia to Kenya. So that is to say that if a very large proportion of your network is low voltage, that means, and medium voltage, that means you are using medium voltage to move a lot of power in your country. That is not a good structure. And indeed, if you go to developed countries where at times even, and that even speaks to the issue. In layman's,
I'm just thinking, maji ikiwa na pressure inasonga haraka. That's my very layman way of thinking of it.
Pipe kubwa.
Pipe
kubwa ndio mzuri ya kupeleka maji.
Exactly.
Yes.
Pipe ikiwa ndogo, then
yes.
Okay, see pressure ni okay, sawa. Sawa. We're just trying to simplify.
That's
500,000
the domain of civil engineers. They'll talk about friction or losses and all that. But coming back, let me give you an example. one of our medium voltage lines runs from Lanet and is the one that serves Maralal and those other places. If you sum the total length of all the line and the spars, it's 1,500 kilometers. And this is 33 kV line. If you were to have replaced that with a transmission line of 132, the losses, the losses has two components, technical and commercial. The technical losses alone would be 1/16 of what we are currently experiencing. Okay. Let me give you the example, even one other one. Between Ethiopia and Kenya, we have a link 500,000 volts. They send 200 megawatts from Ethiopia, a place called Wolaita Sodo. By the time it's in Suswa, it has not even reached the load centers. It's 193. 7 is gone. You may say that 7 is very high and we need to reduce it.
Right.
True. If you had taken that voltage to 1,000 instead of 500, then it will be divided by 4. You would actually be saying that 7 divided by 4. But the challenge would be the lines would be massive,
right,
and the cost would be much more. So one has to strike a balance between what do you allow and what.
It's a balancing game.
Yes, it's a
Eric's
balancing
question.
Okay.
When are we getting?
When are we going to get cheaper power?
Cheaper power, yeah.
Progressively, because now as some of these thermos get retired, then of course the cheaper generation is going to come in. The other aspect is if the uptake was to increase.
What do you mean uptake? More consumers?
We don't need necessarily more consumers. We need consumers to consume more. Because if 70% of our customers
just using bulbs
are only using for bulbs, that is a challenge. It's a major challenge because 70% are using between 0 and 30 units. If it was such that it was to be pushed, and maybe actually when you even look at the issue of lifeline,
right,
possibly some are even, those who are using bigger things are still falling within those brackets. So the whole issue is the usage of power.
Okay.
If the usage could increase, but even another challenge that we have again in terms of even that journey is that a number of users are also getting off the grid, using solars, and even tying to our lines. That again poses another challenge in terms of even the cost of maintaining the network, even as they have left and still connected to us. So yes, ultimately we are committed towards ensuring that generation costs come down. And what I was just departing from is that we need more in transmission. Because the more you now increase the proportion of transmission, then you start also reducing the technical losses. And that's why I was calling that really there is need to support Ketraco to complete some of the transmission lines. Right. Because for as long as they are not complete, we can have a challenge. I know there's a conversation to have PPPs also enter into that space.
Yes.
That is definitely going to assist us. The more we extend our transmission links, the more we can reduce our technical losses, and also we can even increase the reliability of our supply. Okay. And I was mentioning, I think...
Hold on. Transmission is only taking 4% of how much we pay.
Yes.
Right? So even if we increase this transmission and all, we expect it's going to get cheaper. Let's even say it's getting expensive because it's more capex coming in, right? It goes to 6%. The bulk is a 63 to 65% of generation. So we are retiring the expensive thermal generators, IPPs, and replacing them with the cheaper other generators like geothermal and all.
Yes.
But also you said the cheapest is hydro. The way our climate is looking, our hydro, we don't have our dams, the Seven Forks dams. Which other hydro dam do you have in this country?
There is
Tuckwell?
Yes, there is Tuckwell, but there is the potential of the Grand Falls
potential.
Dam, really to
the Ethiopian one
us,
or
no, Kenya, yes,
to build a
which can give us, I think it's estimated to about 800 megawatts.
Okay,
that is a project we would actually say let's fast track it.
So I'm looking at practicalities.
Yes.
Thank you. So the practicalities is that at present, our only new source of our incoming sources of cheaper power are mostly geothermal, right? And then we come into the others, maybe solar and maybe wind, which not stable.
Not stable. In
Currently, our hydro, we don't have any new one coming. Even if we get into that, start constructing that dam, it will take another 15 years.
It could take short time.
We have some IPPs, thermal IPPs that will retire in 2035. That's like 10 years from now. So we are basically saying that don't expect cheaper power in this country for the next 10 years.
No, that is not what we are saying. Let me debunk that. If you looking at this year, I've said already there are 70 megawatts coming on stream. 35 megawatts
Yes.
from Kaishan.
Yes.
And another 35 from, I think, Globalec. So that is 70 megawatts. There is a geothermal plant, which it was being refurbished by Kengen. Is going to inject maybe another 70 or 80 megawatts.
Okay.
That is already 70.
Within the year?
Yes, yeah. That is 70 plus 80. Come the end of this, that is come December, the PPA we entered with Ethiopia Electric Power is to change from, currently we are importing 200 megawatts. It's going to increase to 400 megawatts. And one of the key issues, and that's why I kept talking about transmission,
Right.
our key issues is the grid constraints. Otherwise, we could even take more power from Ethiopia. The link can support up to 2,000 megawatts theoretically.
When you say grid constraints, what do you mean?
What I mean is our ability to
take the power.
Maybe in
Okay,
very simple terms, when power lands in Suswa, and we have 3 lines coming from Olkaria, we have the Lake Turkana wind power, which brings on average maybe around 200 megawatts, but rated, of course, the maximum can be 310 megawatts. Then we have the Ethiopia line, all coming to Suswa. Whenever power lands there are 2 evacuation paths. There is the line that belongs to Kenya Power. We call it Suswa Nairobi North.
Okay.
There are 2, it's a double circuit line. That is one evacuation path. The other one is Ketraco, where on one circuit, we have it going between Suswa and Isinya. I think you know where Isinya is.
Yeah.
It lands in Isinya, that is a 400 kV link. And then the other side, that is the 220, goes to a place called Kimuka. It goes what is called line in, line out. It goes in and then comes out and proceeds all the way to Isinya. Now, the challenge has been, the moment the power resources increase, it reaches a level, power just chooses to go the path of least resistance. So this path of Suswa Nairobi North will start reaching the maximum it can carry. And normally, if you are to exceed the maximum it can carry for a long period, it will trip. And if those double circuit lines trip, you may be staring at a national blackout.
Okay.
It may actually. So the challenge has been
So you
that
have
evacuation.
again, you can't take much more than that 200 megawatts from Ethiopia. Let me ask.
Yes. So there are a number of things that we are now doing. Maybe just so that I just complete that conversation.
Okay.
So what was to have resolved that particular challenge was a project which was to be done by Ketraco. Of course, I think there was also a PPP arrangement. What we are calling Gilgil Thika Mala. This was going to provide an alternative path for the rich resources of geothermal which are in Olkaria.
Okay.
Instead of now coming to Suswa and overloading it and creating the situation that I mentioned to you about.
Yes.
There will be a good quantum leaving from going to Gilgil, coming to Thika, and then coming back to Mala, and then, of course, it connects to what is called the Nairobi ring.
Okay.
So that would have provided that relief, which would then have enabled us to take higher quantum from Ethiopia.
Is that still in the plan?
No, that is still in the plan. But what we have done now as Kenya Power, because we know we are under obligation to take 400 megawatts come December this year, was to ask ourselves, now that this one didn't move as fast or is not moving as fast, we are not just going to sit like lame ducks. Because the challenge would be that DG exposure hits Kenya Power directly. We are the ones with the PPA.
Yes.
And you cannot explain and say, you see, the reason why we are unable to take is because there is a sister agency who was meant to do this, and those are stories.
So,
this is a contract. So what we are doing what is called reconductoring. What reconductoring does is that you now use conductors of the same weight, but which can carry up to 1.5 to 2 times the quantum.
Okay.
We are calling it carbon co-conductors. So we want to reconductor Suswa Nairobi North, which then currently the maximum is around 500 megawatts.
Okay.
But when we do that reconductoring using carbon co-conductors, we may be able to push to around 750 to close to 1,000. Now, when we have provided that room, we can even tell Ethiopians, bring more power.
Bring more power.
We are ready for that.
And
we are also reconducting another one between Juja, or rather between Naivasha and Juja, which again is another path from Olkaria. So that when it lands again from Olkaria, it goes to Naivasha.
Right.
And then the path that brings directly to Juja, again, will be bigger capacity.
Let me ask 2 Mwananchi questions.
Yes.
Very simple ones. Reliability. Last year we saw national blackouts frequently. Then a lull, I would say, something fairly frequent as far as infrequent as far as blackouts are concerned, especially big ones. What is being done to ensure reliability of power and stability across, the entire grid? That's one. Then two is just an observation around the safety of power lines. Sometimes you look around Nairobi and power lines, phone lines, everything meeting, trees, everything, and they look like they're about to fall. 1, 2, 3, a strong enough wind, and it's a proper disaster. And there's a video I wish I'd even gotten with our producer Wangeshi, and a phone line falls and it's leaning close to a power line. Yani vitu tu ni nyingi. But those two questions, reliability and then the safety around power
On
lines.
reliability, there's a lot of investments. There is, first of all, whenever there is any small outage, we normally want to go into the root cause analysis. What the root cause analysis is really, why did it happen?
Yeah.
And what we established is that one of the things that determines how the grid is going to respond are the settings you put in substations and in generation. There are certain settings which may not have been correct. Okay. Some of it even touching on our IPPs. So one of the things that we did do is to ensure that we synchronize all the settings. Because at times when you don't, and indeed, even the initiative is not only within our boundaries. We have been engaging the Ugandans. In fact, we were in Uganda last week, and we may be going to Tanzania shortly. This is an interconnected grid. What happens I think there was a time what happened in Kenya caused a national blackout in Rwanda. Because we are linked. The line goes through Uganda and then it goes to Rwanda. So we need to synchronize all of them. And what we mean by synchronizing all of them is that at times, let me give you an example, that when it notices something dropping, the natural tendency when you set your equipment is another one rises up to cover for that. Yeah. But at times, maybe the fault is too big that this one should not be increasing. It should also respond in a similar way. So we want all of them to be synchronized so that if a particular reaction is expected, then all of them respond in harmony. Otherwise, we've had situations where Uganda and Tanzania start oscillating. We call it oscillating. And actually, at times, it can cause a total collapse. Okay. So there are things we've done at the issue of configuration settings. We call it protection settings and protection coordination, which we have done and we are still almost at advanced stages. But the interventions that we did at the time has really assisted. Okay. One of them, for example, was that one of the key issues used to be overloading of the line between Kisumu and Moroni. It's actually Mamboleo Moroni. So whenever it reaches certain levels, we now ensure that it doesn't allow certain levels to trigger. Instead of it going beyond, it load sheds. Load sheds means you remove part of the customers that are contributing to this situation so that you manage the load. So those are some of the interventions. Okay. Another one is maintenance. We started maintaining a number of just to ensure that all the equipment are okay. And of course, at lower levels, because some of it is even linked to what you are saying, even looking at the distribution network. And initially, I think the reaction of Kenyans, when we are clearing the traces, the trees and all those things that were quite ugly, there was a lot of backlash on us. At the time, they never understood in fact, they branded us anti-green.
Environment.
But when you looked at it, we were planting a lot of trees, and we still do in a place called Narasha. There are a number of forests in Kenya, and our message is, trees next to a power line is not good, but in the forest, let's support one another to plant them there. So those are the things. So where the citizens have cooperated, and we really have a massive support, there are still those who have really declined us the opportunity to ensure that we deal with such kind of challenges. And again, of course, there are those also who encroach onto our lines. And again, we really need support from the general public so that whenever they see it, they call us and they outweigh those who are saying no, so that we can have a clean network and a more reliable network. I was mentioning that between 60 and 70% of localized outages is just because of trees, because of these encroachments.
Wow. Engineer Siror, thank you very much for joining us today. You see the need for us to have another conversation very soon, because there are very many questions even that are coming here and comments that we can address even in the next conversation. Engineer Dr. Joseph Siror is the MD and CEO of Kenya Power. He's been our guest. He'll come again soon. Our next conversation, we're going to switch it over. It's going to be on male reproductive health, and we have a consultant urologist from the Aga Khan University Hospital come and join us to explain to us all those issues of prostate health, the vasectomy, and so on and so forth. Keep it here for that. It's 8:09.